Appreciate it very
My
much.
pleasure.
Wow, what an introduction, Chuck. Thank you so much. This is an amazing honor to see all of you, and the turnout is spectacular. So I'm blessed, and this will definitely be one of the highlights of my career presenting to you this evening. So I've been at this for a while, 36 years, and I know a little bit about art. So I can't go any further without introducing the finest work of art I've ever known, and that's my wife. Please stand up. Monica. Yeah. This young lady asked me to dance. This young lady asked me to dance at Mr. Lucky's in West Phoenix 45 years ago. And we've been dancing ever since. Yeah, I'm blessed. So, anyway, like Chuck said, I have an odd background, but I've got a lot of information to cover. I have over 20 minutes, I think, or 15 minutes of just footage and stills. But the fun thing about tonight in preparing for it is I thought rather than focusing on the finished pieces, let's talk about what was behind the scenes and the inspiration for these pieces. And I guarantee you, if 5 of my friends were in this audience right now, they would leave the night thinking or saying, "You never told me that story. Why?" It's just something I don't talk a lot about, and I came across footage and photos I forgot all about. So a brief Reader's Digest history of my upbringing, which relates to tonight, is I was born in 1954 in Phoenix, like Chuck said. Father was an engineer, a brilliant engineer. My mother was an amateur painter, a very good amateur painter. So I grew up taking classes with my mom, thinking I was going to be an artist. So, long story, after 9 years of moving out of the house and doing drywall, where the big money was in Phoenix, I ended up in the bizarre world of taxidermy. In 1982, Monica and I opened our first taxidermy studio, commercial studio. So it wasn't just out of the house, it was, and we starved. And we worked hard, and we worked ungodly hours, but we met people like the Whitmans, people that go back so many years from my profession as a taxidermist when we did really good work. But I can't tell you how many times the accountant pulled us into his office, and I still get a sick feeling in my stomach, and he'd slide the profit and loss statements across the table, highlights all over it, and say, "You're not making it. You've got to find something else to do." So, excuse me. I thought, well, I got to do something with my hands. I got to do something that, I have learned from taxidermy, so I guess that would be sculpting. So Monica and I signed up for a class at Phoenix College in sculpting. And the minute I walked through that door, it was like this hammer hit me over the head. It's like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I don't care what it takes. I will do it. So by day, I was a taxidermist, and by night, I was a sculptor. So Monica and I are trying to hobnob and get around, the people that collect art and so forth, and we would go to functions outside the taxidermy world. And people would be talking to me, and I just knew the question was coming. What do you do for a living? Taxidermy. Oh, how nice. That's like, oh, okay, we'll see you later. But I learned if I said taxidermy fast enough, it sounded like tax attorney. So then I would tell them, they'd say, "Hey, how do I shelter my assets?" I'd buy a taxidermy shop. That's a good way to shelter your assets. Anyway, so sculpting like crazy, get a few lucky breaks. I finally get an interview with Troy Murray at Troy's Western Heritage Gallery on the corner of Scottsdale Main Street. It was like, the only thing I could say would be like an athlete making the Olympics. If I could get in that gallery from taxidermy to that gallery, would have been a milestone. So I finally got an interview with Troy, and he says, "Bring me your favorite piece." It was a little mule deer study. I took it and put it on his desk, and he kept looking at it and turning it as I'm talking to him and turning it, and I'm thinking, God, I'm sweating bullets here. He goes, "That's nice, but what's it doing?" And I go, "I don't know. What is it doing?" "It's just standing there. It's not telling a story." And I thought, man, that is awesome. I got advice from Troy Murray. He says, "Here's the deal." He said, "Wildlife isn't selling. He said, Western is where you want to go. You come back to me with 3 Western pieces as soon as you possibly can, and we'll talk. And so I left there thinking, I'm a taxidermist. I know animals. I've ridden horses, but now I need to sculpt Western. So I was like Edward Scissorhands for 3 months. I sculpted like crazy. During that time, Ken Payne, who many of you know, or hopefully know, had his own gallery, Mountain Trails Gallery in Sedona, had his own PBS show. Very few people knew this, Sculpting with Ken Payne every Sunday. So I was at the kitchen table sculpting Western pieces with Ken Payne. Well, here's the other thing. Troy said, keep it small because price points are really critical when you're an up-and-coming artist. You've got to have price points less than $2,000. I said, okay. So I sculpted like crazy. I got 3 pieces done, and it was a turning point in my career. He took all 3, and I have one of them here tonight. This little guy here changed my life. That was my first Western piece, my first human figure, and my first horse. So, and his face is about as big as my little fingernail. It's called the Cowboy Up. So that little guy right there got me going. So I get in the gallery, and I'm just elated. I go in one day, and guess who's looking at my work? Ken Payne. He's standing there looking, and I go, oh my God, that's Ken Payne. So, and I'm pretty shy, actually, so I thought, I'll get up the nerve, go introduce yourself. So I did, and he goes, show me your work. And I said, you're looking at it. He goes, give me your number. And I said, okay. Gave him my phone number, and 2 weeks later he called and said, I have an offer you cannot refuse. I will pay you X number of dollars a month if you come up here and be one of my 3 artists in my 3 galleries, and I'll guarantee you this much money a month. If your sales don't exceed that, I'll pay you. So overnight, we shut the shop down, sold our house, bought a house, and I became a full-time sculptor in Ken Payne's, one of the 3 Ken Payne galleries. And he never had to pay me. The sales were so good, he never had to pay me a dime. So that brings us up to, thank you. So that's my Reader's Digest version of what leads to tonight. So anyway, so we go back, let's see. We'll go to the next frame. Is that working, Hugh? Oh, here we go. This is me as a starving artist. Yes. So all those years, now my mother was a painter, as I said, and I can't go back on this, I'm sorry, but one of her paintings was in that booth with me. So we were trying to sell her paintings as well as being a taxidermist. So how do I approach sculpture? Is the same way I did taxidermy. It started with a skeleton. So I started developing my own armature systems that started like this, and then we would add the bones. And then what I did was, if you look closely, there's joints where the leg joints were. I made these articulated skeletons that bent where the legs actually were supposed to bend. And then I would sculpt the bones, and then I would flesh the top of that. This is a domestic dog that I was doing for a friend of mine. So this is an armature for an eagle. Now, the next thing that was happening in my career is I was not happy with everything I was doing. It was like for every 3 or 4 pieces I would sculpt, I'd be happy with one of them. The thing that was really bad about it is I couldn't tell why one was better than the other or what happened that made it that way. It was my reference. I was using dead reference for my work, right? So that meant I needed to start using live reference. And it was the turning point in my career working with these animals. So you can imagine, you can't get that from a photo, right? So I'm working on this life-size deer, and what you don't know in here is they're eating it. Yeah, I always knew deer were goats, but these things were eating my deer. And we all know what this is, one of our favorite little creatures. This is Petunia. Petunia was raised as a pet illegally by somebody in Scottsdale. The Game and Fish got a hold of her and started rehabbing her. And the lady that was running the rehab center said, Ken, I know you want to do a javelina, come on down. So this was my little girl. She would get on your lap. Oh, this is another friend of mine. Yep, yeah. So this is Brutus. We're going to talk about in a minute. But if I'm trying to convey movement like this, I can't do that from a photo. And if I didn't know taxidermy, I wouldn't know how to get that kind of movement in my work. That piece won first place here at the Mountain Oyster Show a few years ago. And then this Noble Express, the second winningest Arabian horse in American history. But to get that strength and movement, I can't do that from a photo. I flew to Michigan to work with him. If I'm showing expression like this little curiosity on this little cub, I can't do that unless I've seen it. You know, I couldn't do that from a photo. Love Gone Wild is the name of this one. We'll cover a little bit more. But the point is, I'm trying to capture personality and emotions. This is called anticipation. Yeah, and he is anticipating his next meal for sure. So back to the deer. So here they are. I've put weeks of work into this, and they're eating my piece. And so I'm pushing them away, and finally I'm trying to get it out of their mouth. I'm trying to get the clay. I thought, I'm going to poison these deer, and then they'll never have me back again, right? So anyway, they kept doing it, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to leave their tooth marks in here. That's what I'm going to leave. They signed it. So I casted that piece with those gnaw marks all over the piece. Now, you know, there's going to be a common theme here tonight. You're going to see deer or anything else like my nose. I don't know what it is about it, but you'll see other images proving that animals like my nose. So this was the finished product. And they're bite marks you can't see in this image, but they're bite marks. Now, bison. Biggest bison, to this gentleman's knowledge, in captivity, 2,600 pounds. His name was Tatanka. And what you don't see here is he feeds him whole loaves of bread. So he says, Ken, just go over to Tatanka, take a loaf of bread, smash it as small as you can, and give it to him, and he swallows it like a pill. He was immense. So I wanted to sculpt him, but I didn't realize that this bull was a celebrity in Layton, Utah, and the paparazzi showed up. Now, so I'm trying to sculpt this thing, and I'm getting, talked to and interviewed and so forth. Well, the material we use is wax, and when it's 20 below zero, like it is right now, you don't move it. So I put all the paparazzi to work and gave them clay to put it under their armpits to keep it warm. So anyway, I ended up sculpting this bull who was absolutely fantastic, a great model. And then look at the size of this thing. He is just human. Now, we were taught in college when we took our course, take a photo home. Can you imagine trying to capture that animal with a photo? And when I'm feeding it, it's breathing on me, it's licking me, I'm holding it, and now I'm sculpting it. And this is called Snowdrifter. So that came from Tatanka. Now, in 2016, Congress actually did something good. They passed the National Bison Legacy Act. They made the bison the national mammal. And it's weird, very few people know this. So along with the eagle being our national bird, rightfully so, the bison is our national mammal. And in this piece, I wanted to convey the history of the bison. So we have the wagon wheel for the pioneers. Below, I did a bas relief that's only 2 inches wide and about 12 inches long, conveying bison in, before white people got here and destroyed them. And then there's a close-up of it. They're coming from the mountains, just numerous bison. So now that's a patina, but I want to show you something, if I can. These panels here are the same panels, but you can see how much different they look with a patina. So those panels were under that piece to show the history. The next side is when modern man came along. Let's see here. And the railroad, and shooting them from the... Now there's 28 bison in that photo. You can't see, but to the right of the engine there is a little herd, and those things are about the size of the, pencil lead cut. They're little tiny things. Anyway, that's the backside. There's a Sharp's rifle in there to convey the hunting, and a portrait of Buffalo Bill Cody on the right and a bison skull on the left. It's the fastest selling piece I've ever sculpted. It's gone. Now this really happens. Now you imagine, wolves test the strength of their prey animals by chasing them. But sometimes they don't judge what they're chasing properly. So you imagine a 2,000-pound bison in its prime thinking, no, you're not doing this today. So this is called expect the unexpected. This piece is called Quiet Thunder, another wagon wheel piece to convey the plains, pioneers, and so forth. But I kind of thought that Quiet Thunder was a good one for this because they look so passive and docile, yet they can run 40 miles an hour in 5 seconds. They're powerful. Elk. Have you ever been chased by an elk? I have. Yes. So elk are magnificent. Monica and I and her mom were in Yellowstone, and I was being very respectful. I was in a paved parking lot with a camera with about 50 people, and I'm taking photos of this bull. And it was one of those things like, you notice how small things look through the lens of a camera, you don't realize they're that close? All of a sudden I hear people say, watch out, and I see his eyes roll back in his head. I put the camera down, and he's from here to the wall, and he's coming after me. He jumps over a rock wall, chases me through the parking lot, through cars, and everything else. My mother-in-law, thank God, dived into the car, and all I remember was a Volkswagen. He was on one side of it, and I was on the other, and his horns were coming over the top of it like he wanted to get me. And I thought, oh my God. So I didn't do anything wrong. Anyway, so I'm standing there, and everybody's going, do you see that? And they said, watch out, here he comes again. So he came back for a second round and chased me around the car again. Yeah. His name was Charger. That was his actual name. Yeah. So elk fighting, oh my God, they're just so powerful. This is called vital ground. I've seen this happen. My wife Monica and I were up. I've called a lot of bull elk in during the rut. And we had 2 friends that were joining us, 2 ladies that were joining us one morning. And we got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We drove and we got to this big meadow. And I had a bugle and I got an answer. And I thought, okay, there's a big bull over there. So we kind of moved closer. And all of a sudden, this bull came around this meadow through the juniper trees, coming right at us, bugling. And the gal with us had just had a hysterectomy. And she says, Ken, I can't climb a tree. I just had a hysterectomy. Is he going to get us? And I said, I don't know. I'll try to tell him. So that's all I could do. So anyway, this is the biggest piece I've ever sculpted. It's almost 11 foot tall to the top of its horn. It was a commission from a smaller piece. A gentleman wanted it this size. I did an edition of 18 of this one. It's called High and Mighty, and it sold out. So they're all over the West. There's a couple in Arizona. This is one of my clients' backyards with the Tetons right there behind it. Okay, here's Noble. What an amazing animal this creature is. He's still alive, thankfully. So this client flew me in his private jet all the way to Michigan to meet Noble Express and start studying him. That face is amazing. So I can take measurements, I can study him, and start working on my armature. And then I go on the paddock with him. And so an Arabian stallion is a pretty wild animal. I mean, they act like a gazelle. They're just light-footed and they're spirited. So the handler says, I don't know if you should go in that stall with him because he's pretty rambunctious. And I said, okay, well, let's see what happens. So I got in there, and then he and I fell in love, and this is what happened. I couldn't sculpt because he kept standing between me and the horse. I couldn't sculpt. He was jealous. He was jealous of the sculpture. Look at that face. Yeah. Amazing, amazing creature. Yeah. So there he is. So the client was so happy he bought 7 of these pieces. Noble Express. Just a majestic, one of the most amazing animals I've ever worked with, without a doubt. Okay, and here's our little Petunia. So Petunia, I got to name her because I'd worked with her so much. But she would come in there and she would make these little puttering noise. She'd roll back on her back, and you'd rub her belly. Her little pink tongue would stick out, and she'd make little puttering noises. Want it in your lap. Give me kisses constantly. And there's the nose. Again, I told you, I don't know what it is. And there she is in bronze. She's almost all sold out. So moose, I spent a lot of time in Alaska. A friend of mine was a bush pilot up there, so I went up there a lot with him. These bulls are in captivity. Ever been charged by a moose? I have. No, I have not. I'm sorry. But anyway, I've been really close to them a lot, and I've seen a lot of them in the wild. And they're just what they say. They're a horse put together by committee. They're a bizarre-looking creature. So anyway, I sculpted this piece in Alaska. It's called Bull Market. So this is a good example of how a piece is so transformed from clay to bronze. They just change completely. Yeah, the stock market must have been doing good then. Bull market. Yeah, it was fun. Now meet my friend Feathers. A friend of mine is a wildlife rehabber that specializes in quail. This little quail she got as a chick, as she does, countless every spring. And so she actually gets a group of them together, rehabs them to get a certain age, probably a couple months. She takes them all as one little covey in the middle of nowhere, and she releases them. And then she drives away. Well, this little guy wouldn't let her drive away. It kept chasing the car. So she'd catch him, she'd take him home, she'd rehab another group and release him. Feathers would be in her rearview mirror chasing her as she drove away. 3 times she tried to release him, and he just he wasn't a quail. He was a human. So anyway, so she got him, and now if you're a licensed wildlife rehabber and you have an animal in possession that actually could be released, it has to be used for education. So coming to the gallery is education, right? And also, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife requires that they log a certain number of hours every year in education or they're euthanized. Yeah, believe it or not. So he got his education, a lot of his education hours at the gallery. And also, Monica got a raise because I was paying that quail more than her. Yeah. She said, you pay that quail more than me. So anyway, he was a model for several of my quail pieces. This is one called Cheap Transportation. He's there on my shoulder. When I would leave the room, he would fuss. And if you could see in that bowl, I would bring him, he would only eat romaine lettuce. No iceberg. Okay? He loved red wine, coffee with cream, and his version of crack cocaine was a poppy seed muffin. And as they say, what goes up must come down. I mean, he made messes everywhere. But he was my buddy. He would fuss if I left the room. I could hold him. I could spread his wings. I could do all kinds of things with him. This is another piece that was made to hang on the wall. It had 5 chicks on it when it was all done. But here he is, He lived to be 9 years old, which is great. This is called Cheap Transportation. Okay, and this is him flying. This is called High Rise. Joe has this one. This one sold out recently. But here's a good point. Bronze is a heavy, clunky medium. To make it look like it's flying, you have to really pull some strings and elude the viewer so you can hide the fact that it's a heavy, clunky medium. So I'm known for suspending, like the tip of the left bird is just touching the back of the middle bird. The tail on the upper bird is just barely touching the left wing of the middle bird, and that middle bird is holding all that weight up. So this is, I think, where my dad's engineering blood kind of pays off a little bit, because there is a lot of engineering in this. Not only do I have to figure out how thick that bronze has to be to hold each of those birds up, I have to figure out if it's going to balance. It could tip over. If it's top heavy, it'll fall over. So I love the challenge of trying to convey flight. These are 2 bobwhite quail. Again, the upper bird's barely touching the lower bird. And this is one of the best patinas I think I've ever seen. It's amazing. Okay, back to the Wildlife Rehab Center. Don coyote, lemurs, peacocks, crowned herons, lemurs. I mean, that's a wallaby. But here, on this particular day, I'm doing an owl. So a lot of people don't know that our common armature material is just basically store-bought hardware material. It doesn't look very happy, does he? But everything is flexible. So in this video, I'm using annealed aluminum wire. And the concept being I have to sculpt as fast as I can, and I have to be able to move that piece to capture the movement I'm seeing in the bird. So now what I've done is I'm building the bones for the wings. So now if I want the wings closed, they're there. If I want it flying as I sculpt, there it is. That's the flexible armature that I use. So this looks a little alien here, but you'll see how I start. And then you'll see how it ends up a little bit here later. Now it's still flexible, I can move it. If that owl hits a certain position, I need to be able to move it fast, and I need to be able to memorize the position of that bird. So this is about 3 hours into it. I even make my own tools to give me the texture that I need. Okay, so this is a quick draw. Now this, to prove I'm crazy, every year I do what I call a quick draw at the gallery, where I bring in a wild animal from one of the wildlife rehab centers to the gallery, and I sculpt it as quickly as I can in an hour and a half. So the Salvatores have been part of this before. They've seen it. It is absolutely nerve-wracking. So this particular owl, his name was Hedwig, was a model for several of my owl pieces. So in an hour and a half, I got to work again like Edward Scissorhands to create something that resembles that owl. We have a barn owl I did last year. He was amazing to work with. Again, quick draw. So now I've got to entertain people for an hour and a half and try to sculpt something. So here's Rise of the Hunter's Moon. These are life-size owls that came from one of those quick draws. It's probably about a 110-pound piece. It's huge, really, really big. Now, this is bookends, words of wisdom. Now, so the joke is from one of my friends, I made the one on the left, the female, which is a little bit bigger, calling to the male. But my friend said, no, she's saying, did you take out the trash to the male? And the male, if you lifted his wing, would have a beer and a channel changer under his wing. So anyway, I liked his story better than mine. And this piece is here tonight. It's called Twilight. It's probably about a 1/3 life-size great horned owl. This one is called Moon Shadow. It's about a half life-size great horned. It also sold out. Now eagles, boy, talk about a hard animal to get your hands on. There's this thing called the exploitation law. If you have an eagle in captivity as a wildlife rehabber, and I as an artist want to hire you to let me get to your eagle, you can be fined and thrown in jail for what they call the exploitation law. You cannot profit, and this is actually a good law, you cannot profit from having that eagle. If you do charge, it has to go to a nonprofit like a wildlife rehab center or the Peregrine Fund or something like this. So I got a hold of this guy. He was in California. I knew he had a live eagle, a flying, and this eagle could fly. I was trying to figure some way of getting access to this eagle. And he said, you know, I've got to go to Phoenix for a demonstration. I said, oh, you got to drive through Sedona, right? Yeah. You need a place to stay? Yeah. You stay at my house? Sure. So he stayed at my house. And this eagle stayed in my studio. And I stayed up for like 3 nights working on him. And I started a piece. But it's, again, here, you know, working with, you know, tape measures, building the armature. Man, I studied this eagle quickly, and I built this horrible piece. And I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I thought, okay, the only thing I like is the face. I tore it apart, went back to the eagle took more measurements and more measurements and went back to the piece and finally finished it. And it taught me a lot. Be tenacious about this, and it made the cover of Southwest Art magazine. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Chuck. So I was flabbergasted. They were doing an article, and the editor called me and said, are you driving? I said, yeah. She said, pull over. I got news for you. And it was an amazing honor. So anyway, it taught me to stay tenacious. This is a current piece called Glory that's in the gallery. It's also designed to hang on the wall. It's hard to describe, but it does hang on the wall. This is called Spirit on the Wind. The CEO for Harley-Davidson commissioned me to do it that big. So it's almost 7 foot tall with the base. Yeah. That one, I had an edition, I think, of 15, and that one did sell. This one is much bigger than it looks in the photo. It's probably half life size. It's called Blue Horizons. Now, herons. I do like herons. They, as an artist, you can't ask for a better subject matter with all the plumes and the beak and the way they pose. This is called Blue Rain. And this is the most award-winning piece I've ever done. It's called the Blue Heron, but it won Best Sculpture of the Western Artists of America. It won People's Choice, and it won something else. I can't remember. But anyway, that shows you the scale. And I'm obviously dating myself. This is how I got gray hair working with animals, right? So Flying Pheasant, another example of a great patina. It's called Frequent Flyer. Now, meet, what was his name on it? Goliath. Oh my gosh, how could I forget Goliath? Okay, Goliath lived in captivity at a wildlife rehab center with about 10 other ravens that had injuries. And they said, if you want to sculpt Goliath, bring him night crawlers. He loves night crawlers. So I said, okay. I go back down there, I get the night crawlers, I set my sculpting stuff up, and he comes, kind of strutting over, and he acts like he can't reach it. And I stick my finger further into the fence, and that big old beak just laid my finger wide open. And so anyway, I didn't realize how sharp their beaks were, but you'll see what happened next. He walked away strutting, showing his friends, "You see what I just did to that stupid human?" So that was his look, and it was worth almost getting stitches to get Goliath to pose for me. So I do love to do birds. Now I was listening. This is one where the title came before the piece, because I was listening to something on NPR about the fast food industry, and I thought, oh man, fast food, that's a great title for a piece. Then ironically, I got access to this Roadrunner, and I created this piece called Fast Food. It was also one of the fastest selling pieces I've ever done. Okay, these wolves were in captivity in Idaho, and they were part of the sawtooth breeding reintroduction pack because of their diverse genealogy. So I worked with these wolves quite a bit. And one thing I learned about wolves is they're not aggressive. Well, I haven't experienced any kind of aggression. They are mortified of people. And even though they've been around a lot of people, the handlers, you move fast, they run. So they're kind of hard to sculpt, and they don't stop. They're always moving. Beautiful faces. This wolf inspired a piece. This is the wolf I brought to the gallery, which is another story I'll tell you in just a second. But anyway, this is another wolf I brought to the gallery. This is Sarge. I sculpted him. Now, I had another bright idea. Let's do a quick draw, but let me do a life-size bust of a wolf, life-size, in an hour and a half. So I find this guy in Phoenix. He's got two, what they call high-content wolves. You cannot tell them from a regular wolf. I hire him. We advertise it. Everybody shows up. The wolf shows up, and he crawls under the truck and hides. So for an hour and a half, he's under that red truck. And I'm trying to imagine what he must look like, because all I have a view is his butt. Anyway, this is another piece. This is called The Howling Wind. Client just recently saw this piece, which had sold out, and they commissioned me to do that one. So this one's currently at the foundry. It's over 5 foot tall. This one's called With Age Comes Wisdom, which was a life-size wolf that I sculpted in Idaho. Yeah. So this was the wolf that hid under my vehicle. So after I sculpted her lying down like this, about 4 months later she had pups. So then I went down to Phoenix and I sculpted her little cubs, and it's called Den Mother. 2 running wolves. That was a large piece. It was almost half life size. This one is called From Here to the Horizon. Again, I love to convey movement, and you can see I'm suspending that lead wolf just by 1 foot. But I've got structure underneath there to hold it in place, and its tail is touching the middle wolf. So this is how we elude the viewer to think it's suspended and try to convey movement. Life-size coyotes, desert silhouettes. You have access to a lot of coyotes over the years. Okay, this is what I love to do. Go to the zoo, take my sculpting materials and my stand, and not know what I'm going to do. I just walk the zoo until I find something that attracts or appeals to me. And a lot of times I do this just as exercise, because I have no intention of sculpt or casting some of these pieces. But today was this African lion. And what you can't see on this is there was a female involved that kept courting him all day long. Look at that face. Isn't that amazing? So then I start, as quickly as I can, building a platform. And then I'll start building the armature. But the female involved in this just kept courting him and rubbing. And I thought, God, I gotta see if I can capture this thing. So I start working with him. And I happen to have a videographer there, as you can tell. It starts to take shape. That's probably about an hour and a half into it. And then this is where he roars, but you can't hear it tonight, but he roars, and I think, what an amazing creature that is. So what I did, now you can see the female, I've got her in there. This is it. It's called The Power of Love. And I did it all in the field. I did not do any of this in my studio. I did not want to ruin the spontaneity I captured. So this is Shay. Shay is an amazing creature that loves me. I love cats. And since animals kind of associate you by scent more than sight, she's smelling to see if it's me, the one that fed her so well last time she visited. But in this particular case, she kind of swatted at me a little bit. So I'm giving her the look, and she's going like, oh, I won't do that again. I promise. And then she jumps in my lap and then starts purring, and she was just really great to work with. So this one was called Cantankerous. And this, Cookie, you know this one? This is called Den Mother. She's got 3 cubs tucked in between her front legs there.
That's Mother Nurture.
Pardon me?
Isn't it Mother Nurture?
Mother Nurture, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mother Nurture. Let's see, move along here. Okay, meet Molly the snow leopard. I'm at the Alaska Zoo sculpting Binky, the snow leopard. Binky, the polar bear. And then the gentleman came along that was in charge of the snow leopards and said, man, you got to come over and sculpt my little Molly. Meet me at the zoo tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and we'll go behind the scenes. I got to pet her and handle her, and she was amazing. Really, really passive. But the one issue, she was having some issues with her kidneys, and you see the swelling on her lower eyelid there. So as I was sculpting her, the handler was saying, okay, take a little off here, take a little off there, put this there, put this here. So it shipped it home, and it made it, and finally casted her in bronze, and I sent that to him. Now, Simba. Simba was one of the most amazing creatures I have ever worked with. He's 140 pounds of lean, mean mountain lion. that was raised as a pet by a guy in Montana. When I heard about him, I had to get access to him and start using him as a reference. Look at the shoulders on this thing. So the guy that had him, and he had a female, this is an 18-day-old cub, and it was funny, it would sit there and sleep like that, and then it would wake up and look at me and spit at me, and then go back to sleep, like, what are you doing? Well, it feels pretty good, and then he'd spit at me again. But anyway, I love cats, and that experience was amazing. Now, get this from a photo. If you're a sculptor, are you going to get how that animal feels, how they move, the expressions on their face? So I can touch the animal and touch my piece at the same time. I can feel how the muscles move, the skeleton, everything. And what you can't hear, he's purring. He's actually purring. The shoulders on that thing. And the feet. So here my goal, I got to pause just for a second. So there's a backstory here. Casey Anderson, the host of National Geographic, all the Nat Geo shows, was the man that was responsible for getting me access to these animals. That was before he was discovered. An amazing man. And I flew in a videographer friend of his from Hollywood to film all this. They worked together and put a film together and went to National Geographic, and that's what got Casey in to National Geographic. Not this footage, but footage they put together. So having access to the animals through Casey Anderson and having his videographer was a godsend. It was total fluke on my behalf. So I asked Casey, who's handling this cat, I said, do you think he'd mind if I squeezed his paw and showed everybody how big his claws are? And he didn't. He let me do it. Now, I watched him use those claws on Casey Anderson about an hour after this happened. Yeah. So I'll stop here. The camera guy said, I would love to have Simba stalking me as if I'm a prey animal. So Casey said, well, I play this game with him where I'll hide behind a bush and shake it, and he pounces on me. So he said, Ken, take him off camera. And so camera guy's here, Casey's here off camera. I let him go, and after the third time of doing that, Simba snapped. And he tore into Casey. All I heard was a scream. I came down, and I remember hearing the sound of clothing tearing. And Casey had a lanyard of pepper spray right here on a little lanyard. The cat's mouth is here. He's got the cat by the throat. Front claws are dug into his shoulder. His hind legs are coming up his legs, just raking him open. And he's saying, get this pepper spray. So I'm trying to reach between them, and they're spinning around and all this stuff. And anyway, thank God the cat just composed himself, let go, sat down, and just gave us the fiercest hiss I've ever heard. And then Casey said, he's standing there with shredded clothes and blood, and just said, act like nothing happened. Let's get the leash on him and back to the vehicle. And so he walked like a dog right back to the vehicle. No big deal. Well, what it was Casey admitted it was his mistake. He was triggering all the hunting instincts that cat had. He was getting grumpy with us, making him do this, and he snapped. And he recomposed himself. And I swear the attack didn't last more than 20 seconds. And it was amazing. So now, as an artist, you're thinking, okay, I just squeezed his feet. I just looked at his claws. I felt his arms. How's now all that attacking going to influence my work? It showed me how that stuff works. And it's fast and it's powerful. And it changed my sculpture of that piece big time. So this is Simba in clay lying down. I had a client that saw that and wanted it bigger. This, thank goodness, was right when we were shut down for COVID. So I decided to do a live stream on the sculpting process and enlarging Simba. So that's the armature. And you can tell this is a big one. This is 25% larger than he actually was. Now I'm sculpting the skeleton. Again, this is taxidermy. So if I have that skeleton as a blueprint, as I go through these pieces and I know where the origin and insertion of the muscles are, I can't go wrong. And it's all flexible. And here he is. all done in bronze. So we did an edition of 20 of this, and it's halfway sold out in 2 years. This is a little mountain lion cub. Now, if you have to look, see the feather missing in its tail, in that bird's tail? Well, it's in his mouth. This is called Meanwhile Back at the Den. So I kind of had this vision of a mountain lion cub back at the den, bored, mom's off hunting, and the scrub jay comes in to scold it, and he gets the feather. And there's Simba again in bronze. This is a 7-foot tall version of Simba. This also sold out. Now, bears. This is a scenario that would take place every year. I don't know if any of you have been to Bearizona in Williams, but it's a fantastic wildlife theme park. You can drive through. Well, they would take the cubs that were born in the winter and every spring put them in this one enclosure, and they would play on these little saplings until the top bear would fall off and the other 3 would go flying. And then they get back up and do it again, and the one on the bottom's trying to get back up there. It would just happen all day long. So this is the piece that came of it. It was called Cub Scouts. Okay, meet Corky. Corky is an 800-pound grizzly bear. He's still alive, thank goodness. This is the first adult grizzly I got access to. This is in January in Rexburg, Idaho. Again, Casey Anderson, my friend, was the handler of this bear. And it was born in captivity, so it was very passive. So I get up there and I start sculpting him. And I'm fairly happy with what I'm doing. And again, it's cold, so it's hard to sculpt. That's the piece I'm doing. And Casey says, "Would you like to pet him?" And I said, "God, yes." So he said, here's what we're going to do. You can get behind me, and we're going to walk up to Corky, and you're going to reach around me as if it's my arm and let him smell your hand. Okay? So I did, and this is what happened. He started nursing on my hand. So Casey said, "Oh, you're fine, come around." That's a sign of acceptance in the grizzly bear world. So then I could touch and handle him, measure him, and then while he was doing this to me, he exhales on my hand, and I swear it was like a draft horse. The volume in that animal's chest was astonishing, and it made me see how big his chest was. Without him breathing on me, I wouldn't have seen it. I felt it. That sensation changed every bear piece I've ever done, because what I had sculpted prior to this was very weak in the chest because that bear breathed on me. This is him again in the next spring, and went back to continue working on him. This is a rare opportunity. Now, this is meet Coco. Coco is a female, and in the bear world, you never try to imprint or tame or do anything with a female bear. They're smart, they're witty, and since they're moms, they're very protective and possessive. They will beat you up. So what you can't see is there is an electric fence between her and I. And she goes through this whole repertoire of tricks to lure me across the fence. Aren't I cute? Aren't I cuddly? Wouldn't you like to pet me? See, I'm just a big teddy bear, and this is the last trick up her sleeve. Smart, smart, smart. Now, her handler of many years, Casey's assistant, a female, fell for that one day. And she got beat up big time. In the process of getting mauled, she survived. She got out of the enclosure and is roaming the streets of downtown Rexburg, Idaho. Casey is trying to take care of the gal, the handler. He gets the paramedics there, and then he goes on the hunt for her because he knows the sheriff's going to come and they're going to kill her when they should, right? He somehow lures her all the way back to the facility and gets her back in her enclosure. Yeah. So I told Casey, I said, "Why would she try to kill?" And he said, "Oh, no. No, we just bleed. You're a plaything. You're a toy. You're entertainment for them, but you just happen to bleed a lot. So it's like, that's just the way it is." So now they had cubs. Meet Brutus. So this is my little buddy, 28 pounds, 3 months old. Now, as an artist, again, here I'm touching, handling, feeding, smelling, everything, and I'm sculpting this bear at the same time. So I had the honor of working with this bear for 19 years, and I would go up and sculpt him about every 3 or 4 months. I'd drive 15 hours one way to where he lived in case he had him, and I would sculpt him at various ages, like at 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, because I wanted to document and have reference from all these sizes of bears. So it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, and he knew who I was. When I would come, this is the greeting I would get. He would give me kisses, and this is him again. Now, he's about 700 pounds, and this bear loves me. He just like, oh, that's Ken, that's Ken, that's Ken. He's about 450 pounds here. Now, again, I'm feeling his muscles. I'm walking with him. If I want to sculpt a bear, I mean, there it is. He's about 550 pounds in that scene where I was walking him. Oh, yeah, a lot of respect. Let me tell you, here's him. He's 100 pounds and bottle feeding him, obviously, here. Now, so he's probably about 700 pounds in this video. So Casey said, okay, anytime you want to sculpt the bear, just let me know what you want Brutus doing, and I'll train him to hit those poses for you. Okay, well, I want him standing. So he would train him to stand, sit, swat at salmon, do whatever I wanted. He would train Brutus before I got there. So he was showing me one day that Brutus was being a little cantankerous and he wasn't doing his tricks. And Casey walked out and he had this bag of gummy bears, okay, like a 2-pound bag of gummy bears. And he's telling Brutus, come on, Brutus, do your swatting, do this, do that, whatever. And Brutus is just sitting there looking at him until he pulled out the cinnamon-flavored gummy bear. Brutus starts drooling, bellowing, and goes through his entire book of tricks just to get that one little tiny cinnamon gummy bear. So that's what he's doing here. He's luring him with cinnamon gummy bears. I want him snarling. He'd snarl for me. Standing and snarling. That reference was invaluable. Touching his chest, touching his arm, everything. And then right behind me, you can't see, I'm sculpting him standing in that position. Swatting for salmon, there he is. They're extremely smart. They are really, really smart. This is the piece that came of it. This is called Bear Market. This is a study of Brutus in the summer here in clay. Now, who knows who 399 is? The famous 399 bear. Yeah, most famous bear in the world right now. She is 27 years old, I think. Has had 18 cubs. She lives in Grand Teton National Park. 2 books by Thomas Mangelson now about her, and this is a commission that a client had me do of when she had her second set of quadruplets. She has an extremely high rate of success raising her cubs because she hangs around the high tourist traffic areas where males don't like to be, and the males are the number one predation on the cubs. So she is smart as a whip. Yeah, so this is her again, a different angle. But if you do, look her up. It's worth. This is called Slippery When Wet. This is called Current Events. Remember that standing pose that Brutus held for me? And that's Brutus at 9 months old. This is Making Ends Meet. That's Brutus at various ages is what it is. Fishing for salmon. I've seen this scenario so many times in Alaska from a distance. And that's kind of something else I want to point out is if I'm, just imagine spending your lifetime as, a young adult in the woods looking at bears in Alaska like I have at a distance through your binoculars, and then all of a sudden one day you get to meet one. And that's how it felt with Brutus. It felt like meeting, or his dad actually, Coco, a movie star. Because you watch them from a distance, you can see what they do, and now you're actually petting them. Yeah, so now this is called First Year of Many. Now, this one is called Knot, K-N-O-T, Knot this time. See the knot he's looking at? Well, there's a squirrel escaping into the left. He doesn't see. He thinks it's going to come out of that knot hole, but it's not. Yeah. Yeah. He's looking, but it's not coming out. I've seen this scenario in Alaska, and that's a rat, my friends. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Anybody has questions? Questions at all?
Do you supervise the foundry process? Are you involved with that?
Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah, absolutely. So it's called the lost wax process. So what happens is our original is made out of clay. As you know, it's like a wax-based clay. A rubber mold is made of that. In fact, I can show you here. So a rubber mold would have been made of this in wax. Now, if you can imagine a two-part rubber mold dividing this piece right in half, is put together, and then molten wax is poured into the mold. So the wax then cools, they peel the mold off, and now you have this exact replica in wax. They then dip the wax into a liquid ceramic, which is almost like a plaster of Paris. It encases that entire wax, very thick and hardens like stone. When that happens, they heat it up. Now the wax melts out of that ceramic, leaving a negative that they pour the bronze into. That stage of where they burn the wax out is why they call it the lost wax process. So now your bronze is trapped within that ceramic. They have to bust it off to expose the bronze inside. So then every time you make a piece, go back to the rubber mold, make a new wax part. It goes through all those steps. They claim 32 steps, but there's a lot. Then, in many cases, they're cut into pieces like the quail that Joe has. That's cut into like 20 pieces. So they'll cast all those pieces separately, and now they have to weld them together. So now you have a big old weld going right through your texture that the foundry artisans have to grind and match your texture so you cannot see that weld. Then they heat it up to about 400 degrees, which opens the pores of the metal, and they start applying these nitrates that oxidize into the metal. So it's not a plating or a paint or a coating, it's an actual etching process that goes into the surface. That's why you can touch and handle them, because it just gets better with age. So many artists, and I can't say enough about the foundry artists, I could not do it without them. They do work I can't do. You hand them your baby and say, I'll be back in 3 months, please take care of it. And then, well, I'm there every week checking them as they come through, but they do stuff that just boggles my mind. I'll think there's no way they'll get back together again, and they do, and they're perfect. And they're in Prescott, which is close. Yeah.
It's funny, I can imagine it on a piece this size, but on those big
Yeah.
things, that's just a little hard to imagine.
Yeah, figure like the life-size wolves or that elk panels, the biggest panel they can do is about a 30-inch panel. So just figure that elk cut into 30-inch cubes, squares, and welded together where you cannot tell. The mountain lion was 22 pieces. The lying down mountain lion was 22 pieces. Yeah. Yes, you.
Ken, what are some of your aspirational pieces that we should be looking for in the next 5 years?
Oh, good question. You know, I just can't get away from doing the same species over and over again. It's just a matter of finding the right story. So you're probably going to see me do a lot more birds, because for an artist, birds are just great for movement. And maybe if I get a chance to go to Africa, you'll see some African pieces. But we'll see on that case. But still having access to all these animals, it's just, yeah, I see my shoes untied, yeah. Wouldn't that be a nice end of the show? Yes. Yeah, okay. But Hugh, yeah, good question, because it just depends what I get access to. That really influences me a lot. It could be almost anything.
One more question.
Yes.
Do you have a special foundry that you use?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're in Prescott, 60 miles from me. Prescott is an interesting town, historically speaking, with foundries, because all the cowboy artists that lived there that started sculpting didn't have foundries. So they opened their own. George Phippen, perfect example. That's how he started casting. And then those foundries changed hands to private individuals, thankfully. But this goes back 50 years. those foundries have been there, and just various owners and so forth. But they're phenomenal. I mean, when I travel, I just did a show in Bozeman, Montana, and several artists showed up. And then when they heard the foundry I use was Peterson's Creations, they go, "Oh my God, can you get us in there?" And no, he's not taking any more workers. He's just so busy, he can't take any more artists. So yeah, we're lucky.
Well, how about a big round of applause?
Oh, thank you guys. This has been a real honor. Thank you.